Our scripture for this evening is Matthew chapter 26, and the verse is number 27. Again, Matthew chapter 26 and verse number 27. As you're turning to Matthew chapter 26, finding verse 27, I want you to think about some things that make us different as people, and then some things that we all tend to have in common. You know, people are wired differently, as we call it. Some people are good working with their hands. They're a good handyman or handy person. Some people are just book smart. You have individuals who, as early as 3 or 4 years old, just have a gift for singing. Sometimes you see athletic ability in a person at a young age. Some folks are very artistic, very creative. Others are very analytical. There are people who love the outdoors and love adventure. And there are people that just love sitting on the porch or in the park reading a book. Everyone is wired different. But then there's something that we tend to have in common. And that is, as people, we don't always recognize how much gratitude we should exercise. I want you to notice something as we talk about gratitude in Matthew chapter 26. And in particular, I want you to notice something in verse 27. And I want to challenge you as we talk about this concept of gratitude. The Bible there says, and he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. It's a familiar verse as we take the Lord's Supper. This is one of the verses used as what we call a proof text or a text to help frame why we're doing what we're doing. But I want you to focus on the idea that he gave thanks. I want you to focus on this because when we talk about him giving thanks, this is not just an ordinary meal. This is what we call the Last Supper. This is his last meal with his disciples. If you study this particular passage, you notice some interesting things. Jesus knows that he is getting ready to go to the Garden of Gethsemane. There he expresses to the Father how sorrowful his soul is. We understand in verses 40 and 43 that in this experience of sorrow, the disciples who were with him couldn't even stay woke while he was praying. We need to also recognize that in verse number 41, Jesus prayed for them because he recognized their weaknesses and that, as he said, the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. We recognize that Jesus was going to be betrayed by Judas in verses 47 through 49. In the 27th chapter, he's going to be mocked and crucified. Now, keep all of that in mind. The Garden of Gethsemane, the inconsiderate sleeping disciples, the weaknesses of the disciples, the betrayal by Judas, being mocked, being crucified. And yet, in an opportunity to pray, he gives thanks. I want you to think about the fact that he gave thanks. Some people, perhaps most people, knowing those things were coming, would use that as an opportunity to complain about everything, and every opportunity they could complain, they would complain even more. As people, we tend to be wired in such a way that we count what we do not have. We focus more on our enemies than our friends. We talk more about how often we've been knocked down as opposed to how many times we've gotten up. We recall our losses easier than we do our wins. We're upset with what God hasn't done as opposed to thinking about what he has done. As we think about Jesus giving thanks and the expression of gratitude, how much more do we have to be thankful for? Who do we have to be thankful for? How much do we have in our lives right now if we never get another blessing? How much do we reflect on just how good God has been to us? Do you know that with gratitude, your life will change? With gratitude, your mood or your emotions will get better. With gratitude, you'll have better outcomes. When you have a gracious disposition, your relationship with other people will get better. And certainly your fellowship with God will be enhanced by just saying thank you. It's not always a need to ask for something. Every opportunity for personal or public prayer does not require a request. Many experiences of prayer, personally and publicly, should be an expression of, Lord, let's just say thank you for how good you have been. This example in Matthew chapter 26 and verse 27 does not mean that we don't have problems. Jesus had problems. Again, the Garden of Gethsemane, his sorrow, his sleeping disciples, the weakness of those disciples, his betrayal by Judas, being mocked, being crucified. Can you imagine how Jesus could have felt in verses 40 and 43 when those disciples were asleep at his most critical time? Have you ever found yourself frustrated because people who you count on were not there for you at your most critical time? Well, Jesus experienced the same thing. Have you ever been betrayed? Jesus experienced that. But at the heart of all that he did, he still gave thanks. Beloved, no matter what we go through, we need to just say thank you. It may just make us a better person. It may help us to see life in a new light. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.